Okay, I don't see myself on right now. I hope you can all see me. Hey, Becky, Roxby, it's good to have you in the house. Could you guys do me a favor and let me know if you see me? Because I'm not showing myself right now. And it says that I am live, but it doesn't seem like my screen looks right. And I can't quite figure out why. Um, okay. Um, so I don't know why that is the case. Um, do you guys see me? Okay, you do see me. Okay, it's just me that can't see me. Okay, that's just good to know. It's just looking a little different. And so I'm going to start playing with the screens here for just a second here. And pull them down. There we go. There we go. Okay, welcome to Zion's Banner Live. I am going to go ahead and set up the Facebook, folks. There we are. And no funny faces. It looks like our health, speed-wise, is pretty good tonight. And so I am glad that that is indeed working. So for the folks that are joining on Facebook, I have good news for you. I have uploaded a link to the PowerPoint. So you guys can download that later and you will have it. Folks, tonight you can see the PowerPoints, but you can also have them. By the way, my friend Vocab said, would you do a minor recap? Because some of the arguments used here are used of Hebrew Israelites. So it looks like they are borrowing a whole lot from a Jewish audience here. So we are not necessarily going to be, well, we're not going to cover this completely. I mean, this is intense. I've spent a lot of time in the library. I'm still spending some time in the library. But I think we're going to pull some really good things away from tonight. Not only just as far as argumentation, but even as far as like doctrine and how it functions. So I am really excited about tonight. Uh, it is so strange not to see myself. This is like really strange. But hopefully I'll see the PowerPoint. Um, we're working with some things. I am using one of my Christmas gifts was a new headset. So I'm really hoping that's kind of working. And that we're going to get all we can out of this. Resources, we are going to do resources tonight. The resources versus Logos 8, which is cheaper. Would you believe that? But if you get Logos 8, you get this huge library, and it ends up actually being cheaper, so that what would cost you $900, really you get like a whole library, and it looks like the Lord. And I struggled with spending the money. It looks like the Lord is going to let me have Logos 8 as of Thursday. And I'm hoping to really use that to up my game. But I got to let you know that the research libraries in Phoenix aren't that great, and they aren't that great for Jewish sources. So the gentleman that I've been communicating with, whose name shall remain nameless because the names are always nameless to protect the guilty, um, um, he's having some problems with me, and I'd like to get back to him, but I really want to up my game. And so he's really my teaching. He doesn't know it yet, but really one of the cool things. It took me a while to get this, but the Lord spoke to my heart. Is that hopefully I can remember it. Is that his attacks are really opportunities for me to become a better apologist. Um, I don't know that I'm going to spend forever fighting with him because he literally writes a book on Facebook, and I do not have the time to go ahead and read something larger than Jane Austen every time he decides to communicate. But we're going to see what we can do, um, but but carefully, because the reality is that I'm not there necessarily to convince him. I'm really there just to give a winsome reasons for our faith, and I think that's the key to apologetics. So that's my personal opinion, um, but we shall see what we shall see. So there is no update tonight, though, because I have been enjoying the holidays. And so I didn't really get any outreach out. I'm hoping to fairly soon and get into some outreach. Um, and so um, hmm, I'm going to go to tonight's lesson and switch that over. Um, and hopefully that is showing on your end. That's the first PowerPoint slide, and that's going to let us get into things. Um, if the screen would just stay a little bit more stable here. Good. Um, and so for you guys, and I'm doing this constantly, I'm talking to two folks here. We're going to get started tonight. And hopefully Facebook will let me work through things. Um, there is a great mystery to the faith. We're going to look at that mystery tonight. Um, the argument has to do with tribal lineage through the Father and the idea that Jesus could not indeed be the Messiah because tribal lineage must follow through the Father. And if Joseph is not the father of Jesus, then he cannot indeed have the tribal lineage, and therefore he is disqualified. And so this becomes an insurmountable problem to Jesus being the Messiah. Now, obviously, from the cycle of Jewish polemics, this is designed to make Jesus a non-issue or non-option for Jewish people. From the standpoint of Hebrew Israelites, they've got their own little agenda there. And so for their own standpoints, this kind of makes it a thing for them. But we're going to look at it. First of all, we have to ask a question. Is the rule about tribal affiliation and tribal identity only through the Father an inviolable rule that must indeed always be true? In other words, has God set this up so that no exception can ever exist? And so we need to look at this and see if this is the case, and then we'll deal with the rest of this. And hopefully this will be a fairly cogent case. So I'm going to click to the next slide. I can't tell how quick the slides are changing on your end because I don't have a visible picture. So I usually like that because I can tell sort of how things are working with you guys and just kind of how the picture's changing. So here's what I'm going to do. If you see the slide, it's Torah, so it's law. One of the folks out there can just say, I see the slide, because I don't know what the latency rate is right now. And I kind of wish this was doing a better job of doing this. But it just is what it is. So I'm going to trust that you can see it. Now, if you're really stuck and you can't see this and you're on YouTube, then I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and download the PowerPoint because you could see it either way. So this gives us another way to go ahead and do this. I'm also going to check the streaming options here. And I'm going to move to lower latency here. I guess I'm not going to move to lower latency. Okay. Eh, what can I say? It says live stream offline, but I know I'm online. So, okay, we'll just go with it. We're going to trust the Lord. Things don't always work out the way you want them to. Let's talk about this. One of the arguments is that this is Torah, this is law, so nothing else counts. I've got you. The instructions that deal with tribal lineage are Torah, therefore they're law, therefore there can't be an exception. Or if you had to find an exception, you'd have to find it within Torah. Let's talk a little bit about what Torah is not. Torah doesn't mean law. In fact, it was so hysterical for me to hear a Jewish person try to pull this because this is really the most ridiculous argument there is. And actually, it works against them. Torah is not law. It comes from the word yara, which means instruction. It actually comes from the Hebrew root, which means to throw, as if you're throwing information out there. And so this slide ends up taking into account the real meaning of the word, you can see the Hebrew there. The 3 refers to the type of verb it is, and then you have some transliteration there. It occurs in the form of a noun, and the noun's taken from the verb, and it means instruction. And they're just letting you know that it's a feminine plural, which you don't really need to know because you're not going to be pluralizing Torah anytime soon. And it appears to instruct, and then in the perfect, and then you can get a noun that is a causative noun, which is to cause instruction, and it means teacher, or mora, which is which is what we had to refer to our male Hebrew teachers as in Hebrew school. And so, frankly, Torah doesn't mean law. They say it's Torah, it's Jewish law. Well, that's not entirely true. It's Torah, it's instruction, but it isn't necessarily law. Now, let's talk a little bit about the idea that everything in Torah has to be a law. Because does that really work that way? I mean, seriously, does it really work that way? So let's look at Jacob in Genesis 29, 28, 29. Then Jacob did so and fulfilled her week. Now remember, Jacob's wanting to marry one girl, right? And he gets Leah. And I've never understood quite how he got quite that drunk. But that's just the case of the matter. And so he goes back to Laban and says, "Wait a minute, you cheated me." And Laban says, "Okay, so fulfill your week with your first wife there, okay? And I'll give you my other daughter, and then you'll work for 7 years for her." And so he gave her his daughter Rachel as wife also. And then Laban gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as a maid. So they both get a maid. And that's going to become a problem because those are going to become concubines. Now, if everything in Torah is law, and every pattern in Torah becomes an absolute rule, then so does polygamy. Okay? Now, we know that wasn't God's original intent, but if you're going to argue that everything in Torah is law, and it must indeed be done, and it must be treated as law, then polygamy is then law. That's just the way it is. And so I stuck this thing up here because really the rabbis had a problem with that very thing. They had Torah that allowed for polygamy. They didn't want to discount Torah. And so they had this awful problem that carried into the Talmudic period where polygamy was still a recognized institution, like in Islam. Go ahead, have more than one wife. And no one could question polygamy. The singular option in the Talmud is that a wife can compel a divorce from her husband if he takes a second wife, but that seems to have remained without following. So as long as a man could support them, he was free to have as many wives as he chose. This makes Judaism more like Islam. But I don't think biblical Judaism is more like Islam. It's totally misunderstanding, and this is what Jesus is getting at, that there's a difference that occurs, and not everything in Torah is a rule. Finally, now this gets interesting, in the beginning of the 11th century, Rabbi Gershom ben Judah of Mentz forbade polygamy under the penalty of excommunication. So finally they get rid of polygamy, but they have this problem because they're treating parts of Torah which were never intended to be rules, and they're treating a part of Torah which was never intended to be rules, that's a more accurate way of putting it, as if it was a rule. And so if you're going to make Torah all rules, and everything in Torah is not descriptive, it's prescriptive, and it's a law, then one of the things you're immediately going to make a law is polygamy. And so that would create major problems. Now, there's a whole host of things in Torah that you would not make a law in this day and age. And so this idea that because it's Torah, it's law, and everything in the Torah is law, is absolutely ridiculous. The word Torah means instruction, and there are some things in Torah that are descriptive. There are some things in Torah that are patterns that might be explaining what's going on or what should go on because of certain circumstances that are not necessarily rules. And so we've got to get rid of that sort of thinking. Okay, now let's really look at the passage here. Okay, and one of the key objection passages that I got thrown at me over and over and over and over again, ad nauseum, was Numbers 1:18. Okay, and they declared their pedigrees after their families by their fathers' households. Okay, now let's stop and look at that. Now, do we admit that tribal affiliation and identity ended up normatively being through the father? Yes, we do admit that. Let's be honest about that. That is the normative situation. However, that is a normal situation for the passing on of property, and that's what was connected with inheritance. So back then, you inherited property, and property was terribly important because it's how you made your living. And so, on the basis of that, you end up having a situation by which property was normally passed through the father's household, and the family name went through the male, as did the property. But let's talk about this very carefully here. Numbers 1:18 is about a census. It's not about royal ascension at all. Now, am I saying it has no bearing? No. What I'm saying here is you're ignoring the intent. You're ignoring the context in a sense. How do you take a genealogy out of context? You ignore why the genealogy or instructions are there. And so they declared their pedigrees after their families by their father's household for the purpose of a census to gather out how many individuals were there, males who could represent their father's families. By the way, this is preparing to go into the land, and so it has to do with really how do I muster an army, and how do we dole out the land? What this is not about is the Davidic king. David is not being pictured at this time. So we're not getting instructions about the Davidic line in particular. We're getting information about the normative way that property was passed down and people kept track of tribes. But what we're not getting is who is the Davidic king. This is not prophecy. This is pattern. And this is not a law. This is the way things were done. Okay, why were things done this way? Well, let's look at this. Every daughter that possesses an inheritance in any tribe of the children of Israel shall be wife unto one of the families of the tribe of her father, that her children of Israel may possess every man the inheritance of his fathers. This is Levirate marriage, which does end up appearing. And what's going on here? So the inheritance of the children of Israel shall not change hands from tribe to tribe. The purpose of these rules was to preserve the tribes so that there could continue to be 12 tribes and so that property could be passed. Okay? So is the purpose violated? And I said the purpose is not violated in the case of the genealogy of Jesus. Now, why do I say that? Because if a woman ended up needing to have a line raised up for her and possess an inheritance, if a woman ended up inheriting because a man had no sons, she had to marry one of the family of the tribe of her father. Okay? Now, does this present a real problem for Jesus' genealogy? Joseph was Jesus' legal father, and he was from Judah. So the purpose of this pattern that you see in Torah is not violated because the property and name did not pass outside of the tribe of Judah. Mary was from Judah. Jesus' legal father is from Judah. There is no switching of tribe here. So what am I getting to? Okay? This objection ignores the purpose for that Torah rule and assigns a function to that Torah rule as to determine what the specifications for Messiah are. And I think it goes beyond the pale. But even if this pattern were somehow an issue, the reality is that the purpose of Torah in these sections is not violated. So this is the normative way of doing things, and this is to prevent tribes from ending up with all the property, but this is not designed to determine the Davidic line. The Davidic line doesn't exist at this time. Okay? But wait a minute, Jeff. You're thinking, but a rule is there, a pattern's there. Obviously, the pattern can't be broken. There can't be exceptions. Well, let's talk about this for just a second. Now, I don't know if you can see this genealogy, and this is why I also made the things available to you. This is the line of Judah. Now, I'm going to put my thing here. I really don't know if the cursor shows up, but if you go near the bottom here, and this should be bigger for you, you're going to look down at that last line, and you're going to see, in that genealogy, you're going to see the name Abigail. And you're going to see the name next to Abigail. Now, see David? This is David's niece. This is David's other niece. Okay? This is Jesse. Under David's niece is a son. So David's niece is being named, but there is no father. Now, wait a minute now. Tribal lineage and identity can only go through the male. Well, then why isn't the father listed there? It would be important to have the father listed there so you could see whether the son was of the tribe of Judah. And so the son would go through the lineage of his father and would have that tribal association. But there is no father listed there. And so they point out that when you look at should be Abishai. Abishai is David's nephew by Zeruiah by an unnamed father. Ooh, so how is it this son here, Abishai, is under the lineage of Judah if tribal identity, such as Judah, can only pass through the father? And why is the father not deliberately named? Isn't that interesting? So wait a minute now. Torah doesn't allow for any exception, but the Hebrew scriptures do. Well, that's terribly interesting. That represents a bit of a conflict. So can we have exceptions? Yeah, we can have exceptions. Now, a pattern is not a prohibition, and we need to be careful here. Okay? A pattern is not a prohibition. If God had wanted to say, at no time could ever inheritance not be through the physical father, regardless of the circumstances, never, ever, he could have used a negative command. Now, there are ways to do that. You can create a permanent negative command like the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not ever steal, okay? And you stick the imperfect verb in Hebrew with the particle lo. Okay? You could create a temporary injunction, kind of like if I say to my kids, don't touch that stove. Well, they're in their 20s now. I don't keep them from touching the stove. Okay? But that's a temporary injunction. When they were little kids, they couldn't touch the stove. I could use L and then the imperfect. I could use none, also ain, in such a way that I will have none of this. Okay? Those are negative commands. Does Hebrew have a way to indicate a positive command? Well, yes, it does. It uses what's called the imperative form of the verb. Or it uses command language, like speak to the children of Israel, saying in the 10th day of the 7th month, you shall do this or that. And it could use command language. But the patterns that you're seeing aren't commands. They're patterns. And a pattern is not a prohibition. Because this is the way it usually is, and this is the way it was designed to be, doesn't necessarily mean it can't ever be other than this. Now, I know the person I'm talking to is never going to accept that. He's going to keep hammering away on the fact this is Torah, this is the way it always is. He's going to ignore that exception, okay? But the reality is the father's not named. The tribal affiliation then could be undetermined. By the way, he might say that person's undetermined. They don't have a tribe. I don't remember a tribe of people that don't have a tribe. But even if you were to argue that, he's still considered David's nephew. If he's considered David's nephew, he has a tribe because David has a tribe and he is the nephew of David. And if no father's named, he certainly doesn't belong to another tribe, but you can't say he belongs to no tribe because he's still associated with Judah's lineage. And he's still associated with David. And by the way, he's listed as a mighty man of valor. Do you have tribeless people running around in key posts in Israel? Like, let's find the tribeless person and put them in charge. There is no indication of he doesn't belong to another tribe. In the priestly case where their tribal affinity could not be determined, they could not serve as priests. He serves as a mighty man, and so that doesn't necessarily follow that there's a tribeless group. There were some priests that couldn't prove their lineage, and because they couldn't prove their lineage after the Babylon captivity, they weren't allowed to be priests. But that doesn't mean that they couldn't prove their lineage just because their dad was not known. Their mom, yeah, I mean, it just refers to their ability to serve as a priest. You don't see that as all the way through for every tribe. Now, here's the thing. I only follow Torah. I only follow Torah. Well, here's the problem with that. Don't the prophets count? Judaism, does it recognize the prophets? Maybe Judaism doesn't recognize the prophets in the own Hebrew scriptures. Okay? Let's take that for a second. Well, you know what? Maimonides, who basically ends up sculpting Jewish thought after he comes on the scene, wrote the 13 Articles of Faith, which are pretty much the only classic statement of what was Jewish orthodoxy, even though all rabbis didn't buy into it in Maimonides' time. It's pretty much the classic statement. It's, if you said, is there a statement of faith to Judaism? There were some attempts before Maimonides, but Maimonides is the only one that caught on. Well, what does Maimonides say about prophecy? You have to believe God communicates with man through prophecy. Now, the wording is different in some versions of the 13 Articles because you have to translate it from Hebrew and you can word it a little different. But the bottom line is that article indicates not only Moses, but it indicates the prophets. Judaism has always held that the Hebrew prophets or canon of the Hebrew scriptures was all from God. Now, I could take you to the actual prophets where it's thus saith the Lord, but the reality is I only follow Torah. No, you don't. The Haftorah is read in the synagogue. If you only follow Torah, there's a problem there. Now let's talk about the reasons that Messiah couldn't possibly be the offspring of a man and woman. Now this is going to be a key argument here because we're going to see Messiah has to form an exception. Okay? And that's the bottom line. The individual I'm talking about has ruled out the virgin birth, so that's not a possibility. And then he says, well, the genealogy has to go through Joseph as physical father. And it doesn't go through Joseph as physical father. Well, if Jesus had no physical father, then the genealogy could not go through his physical father, and he would be an exception. Is that what they teach among the... I'm learning more about the Hebrew Israelites, but they deny the virgin birth, Roxy. And so if you eliminate the virgin birth, you're going to see you do have a real problem with genealogy. Because, see, that's the whole key. The virgin birth explains how this whole thing works. Okay, so let's see for a second here. Now, this is a question that I asked this gentleman, who shall remain nameless, okay? How can a human pre-exist creation, and how can a child pre-exist his parents? I actually asked, how could he pre-exist his parents? Okay, because see, anyone that pre-exists their parents and pre-exists creation isn't just human. What's that? Oh, that's probably why the HI do allow for polygamy, because they would argue that they're keeping the law. I didn't get the question, Roxby. I thought it was in reference to the virgin birth. But yeah, they essentially do the same thing. And what I'm arguing is that that is the pattern, and that pattern's there for a particular reason, but that pattern isn't violated in any way. And now I'm moving on to the fact that there is no way, given Messiah is unique, he's like no one else in the universe. And so he's automatically an exception. And so, how do I know he's an exception? Because he pre exists his parents and creation, and human beings don't do that. That's why we have birthdays. Okay. If I pre existed my birth, when would my birthday be? So that's kind of a real problem, and we don't pre-exist our birth. Now, where did I get the idea that Messiah was supposed to pre-exist? Now, one of the things this guy did is he kept saying that it's the church fathers. It's the church fathers, and these Christians have messed with your brains, and your brains have addled. Well, let's take a look at one of these great church fathers here. This is Paskita Rabbah 152b. Um, I'm going to see if I can reach it real quick, okay? Because I want to put this on. This is a great resource. If you can invest in this book, okay? If you can invest in this book right here, this is a key resource. There we go. Those Messianic Texts by Raphael Patai. There it is. So you both can see it, okay? And this is a phenomenal book, okay? And it gives a lot of the writings that existed around Messiah. So if I wanted to find out chronologically when Pesquita Rabbah was done, okay, I could look in here and I could see when that was done. Take me a second here or two, okay? Pesquita di Kohane, and I'm looking through these rabbinical writings here. I think it's a little later. Pesquita Rabbah, 9th century. Same time as Midrash, Mishli, um, 9th century. Okay, so let's talk about what this is here. This is a rabbinical writing. Okay, this is not the church fathers. Okay, it cracks me up. Okay, the church fathers gave me this idea. Well, no, they didn't give me this idea. Pesquita Rabbati gave me this idea. Okay, so let's see what this Jewish writing. By the way, I mean, this is great. Okay, so all the Jewish sages that wrote Jewish writings that are considered Jewish writings by Judaism all happen to be church fathers, right? That's pretty handy. So let's see what it says. From the beginning of creation of the world, King Messiah was born. Oh, wow. That's pretty neat, right? For he entered the mind of God even before the world was created. Okay. Wow. Now I got picked on a little bit here because I mentioned Rashi's commentary, and it was said you didn't cite Rashi's commentary and what page it was on. Well, I got to be honest. I don't have a complete set of Rashi. Okay, and that's something Logos doesn't come with. It did give me two. It did give me both the Jerusalem and the Babylonian Talmud, the Targums. I'd have to invest more to have a complete commentary of Rashi, even if it was available. Um, but let's be really honest about this, okay? Not everyone has a complete library of Rashi hanging around, okay? So, let's talk a little bit. Now, Rashi's later on. So if I look at Rashi's commentaries, we're talking after the 9th century, okay? Now, this is Rashi's commentary on Micah 5, 2, or 1, okay? Now, if you really want to look this up, you go to Rashi and you look in his commentary, and you can go ahead and you can go ahead and look at Rashi's commentary. So the fact that I don't know what page number this on is not of critical importance, even though I would love having this resource, okay? Rashi's commentary on Micah. And you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, whence David emanated, as it is stated, 1 Samuel 17:58, the son of your bondsman Jesse the Bethlehemite, and Bethlehem is called Ephrathah, as it is said, Genesis 48:7, on the road to Ephrathah, that is Bethlehem, you should have been the lowest of the clans of Judah. You should have been the lowest of the clans of Judah because of the stigma of Ruth the Moabitess in you. That's kind of fascinating too. Okay, Rashi doesn't think much of Ruth. Okay. From you shall emerge for me Messiah, son of David. And so the scripture says, the stone which the builders rejected became the cornerstone. And his origin is of old. Before the sun, his name is Yonan. Okay, now that's kind of fancy stuff here. Okay. Sun there is not S-O-N, and the idea is before the universe was created, before the sun was created, his origins are from old. It's an attempt to translate a Hebrew phrase, Mime Kidim Olam, okay? And so it's an attempt to go ahead and translate that from of old, from days of eternity. And what Rashi is saying here is that Messiah pre-exists. Okay? Before the sun, before the creation of the sun. Ooh, what day is that on? Okay. Before the beginning of the world, Messiah already has a name. And he's going to Psalm 72:17 in order to do this. Now, I don't have the page number, but this Rashi is a church father? Seriously? Boy, I would just love to publish that. I would love to get on and say, hey, look, this Jewish guy named so-and-so says that Rashi, the sage of Judaism, is a church father, and that the church fathers were being preached in the synagogue and commenting on Talmud in the 11th century. Seriously. Okay? Michael Brown goes ahead and does that. I haven't used Michael Brown talking with this guy. Michael Brown is persona non grata because he's really good at what he does. Okay? So then Micah 5:2, 5:1, it has to do with the Masoretic numbering, can be understood as pointing to Messiah's eternal nature, undergirding the reading of Isaiah 9:6, 5 as pointing to Messiah's divinity. Okay, so where does this bring us? Okay? Well, Messiah is obviously not human. We know his mother is human, but we know he's not human. Now let's look at David's Lord. Can David's son be the Lord? Well, let's look at this. Now, this was a favorite of Jesus. The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand till I make you a footstool. The Lord will send out the rod of your strength out of Zion. Rule in the midst of your enemies. Your people will be volunteers in the day of power, your power. In the beauty of holiness, from the womb of the morning, you have the dew of your youth. The Lord has sworn and will not relent. You are a priest forever according to Melchizedek. Now, we're not going to do the Melchizedek part here. That itself has ramifications, but the Lord said to my Lord. Okay? David's Lord is God. Now, if you don't believe me, let's see what happens when the Pharisees get shown up with this verse. If David calls him Lord, how is he his son? And no one was able to answer him a word. From that day on, did anyone else dare question him? Because they understand Messiah's argument, which is clearly that David's Lord is God, and therefore David's Lord can't just be his human son. So, let's go a little further. Behold, the day is coming, says the Lord, when I will raise up to David a branch of righteousness. A king shall reign and prosper and execute judgment and righteousness in the earth. In his days, Judah will be saved and Israel will dwell safely. Now, what this is the name by which he will be called, the Lord our righteousness. Okay, now some Jewish people, and unfortunately there are a few English translations, I really don't like it, that stick the word is. The Lord is our righteousness. They're going off the idea that if you have a noun clause in which no verb is supplied, okay, the Lord is my shepherd, there's no is in Hebrew. If there's no verb there, there's nothing to connect this my shepherd to Lord. And so you infer the word is, okay? And that's called, there's a particular type, a noun sentence or a noun phrase. I'm not going to go into all the details of Hebrew grammar, but there are reasons. And I'm even spending more time in my library looking up this particular Hebrew construction. Okay, because it is used over and over again when God receives a title. Okay? Kara with a title, which would be a noun adjective without a verb, is used as a construct in Hebrew quite frequently. And so I'm going to look at some more of these places. But here's the whole thing in a nutshell. Let's look at this comment here. Jeremiah 23:6, Jehovah Sadikenu, the Lord our righteousness, is also used as a name of Messiah, which even the synagogues cannot lay aside, via Midrash Mishli 57a, which this is adduced as one of the 8 names of Messiah. So let me go here in my book here, those Messianic texts by Raphael Patai, right? And let's go in here and take a look at this. And there's a whole section here on the pre-existence of Messiah. Go figure here. Okay. And names of Messiah. Ooh. So let me see if I can find this here, because this is really interesting. Okay. And this is one of the 7 names of Messiah. What is the name of King Messiah? Rabbi Abba ben Kohana said, Lord, all in caps, by the way. Ooh, Lord. His name is the Lord. Is his name, as is written, I will raise unto David a righteous shoot, and in his days Judah will be saved, and this is the name by where he will be called. Now, unfortunately, it says the Lord is our righteousness. But what's interesting is one of the church fathers, right? Rabbi Abba ben Kahana said, Messiah's name is Lord, and then uses that verse as a proof text. Isn't that interesting? So when he looks at the Lord is our righteousness, he sticks the is in, but still says Messiah's name is the Lord, based on this very text. Now, there are grammatical reasons why I don't think the word is should be there. And by the way, Michael Brown, who is no slouch when it comes to Hebrew, doesn't feel that way either. Francis Dulwich doesn't feel that way. But let's even go a little further here, because I don't think this is Mishli here. Nope. Here are the 8 names of Messiah. Now, this is Berber, okay? I'm getting to it. Well, that's not the best one. Okay. Oh, here it is. Midrash Mishli. Now, the edition is by Berber, but the writing, the Midrash Mishli, is a rabbinical commentary on the Psalms. Rav Chana said the Messiah is called 7 names, and they are Yanan, Sadikenu, Sameach, Menachem, David, Shiloh, and Elijah. Okay? Now, Sadikenu comes from this very verse. And that's the point I'm making. Okay? And that's the point Dulwich is making. Okay? And this is edited by Berber. Okay? If you go to Midrash Mishli 57a, you'll see the same sort of idea. All right? So let's see where we are here. We just had 3 witness texts. I believe it's 3. Yep, 3 texts. Okay, by 2 or 3 witnesses is a thing made sure, right? According to Torah, law, by 2 or 3 things. Okay? Oh, but Jeff, you're quoting them church fathers again, right? Well, I ended up pointing out that it's the first half of the 11th century, and this is a Hebrew writing. By the way, how am I getting that it's a Hebrew writing? Well, not only am I aware that it's a Hebrew writing, and Midrash Bishli was not written by one of the church fathers, but if you go to a Hebrew Jewish dictionary, and this is one of the key ones, you find out this is clearly a Hebrew writing. Okay, so here's the thing. I got 3 texts that point out that Messiah is eternal and divine. So let's see what we got here, okay? We know Messiah's mother was human, but he's eternal and divine. Yes, Rebecca, I would translate it the Lord our righteousness. I would do it because it's a title. The verb is supplied before the title. Therefore, the phrase, the Lord our righteousness, doesn't require a verb between the subject and the word our righteousness. We call that a substantive. And so I would say the is not needed there. But I'm going to do some working with the Hebrew verb kara and see other places where it's used with a divine title. And what I think I will discover is, interestingly enough, that in those places, even the Hebrew Publication Society doesn't always stick the is there. So if you're going to be consistent, why are you sticking is here and you don't stick is in the other places where God has a title? So I would say it is more accurate to translate it the Lord our righteousness. And I would say that instead of the church fathers doing it, it's Jewish writings doing this. Okay? And what I'm looking here at Rashi is I wondered if the is was in italics, but I don't think they're going to do that for you. Okay? I think they just stuck the is there. But Abba Ben Kahana still gets it. He gets it and tries to sidestep it at the same time. Okay. And you're going to see this in the Jewish writings that there's some uncomfortable stuff here that they're struggling with. But it isn't the church fathers making this stuff up. So let's see what we got here, okay? The pattern of Torah is there for a reason. The reason is the transfer of land and the maintaining of tribal identity. The passage which talks about this is not about the Davidic lineage. So you're taking the genealogy out of context in the sense that you're making a pattern a rule about something it isn't a rule about. Okay? There's an exception indicated by later Jewish scriptures. I know that the writer said to me, oh, he was my favorite character and you're a bozo. Okay? But that's not the case. The father isn't listed and he's still listed under Judah. By what right can that be true? And if he's tribeless, then by what right later, as a mighty man of David, is it not stated that he's like tribeless? And the priestly exception is that priests who couldn't prove their lineage could not serve, but it didn't prove that they weren't of the priestly line. It means that they could not serve because their priesthood could not be established, not I'm kind of choking over my words here, but what it means is their priesthood couldn't be established, so they couldn't serve, not that they were liars and they weren't of the priestly line. Okay, because you had to be careful about who did this. You couldn't have other tribes serving. Again, what was the purpose of that? To prevent the other tribes from usurping the priesthood. So when is a genealogy out of context? When the genealogy is being used in a way that's inconsistent with why the genealogy's there. That's out of context. Scripture has a purpose, and when I use scripture for a purpose that is not part of what it's supposed to be used for, I am wrenching it out of its historic context. So there is an exception. But beyond this, Messiah has to be an exception because he had a human mother, but he's eternal and has a divine nature. And so he could not come from a physical earthly father. And that's the problem. The virgin birth explains the mechanism by which you can have a human baby who also has a divine and eternal nature. Now, what can we take away from this? Well, first of all, here's one thing we can take away from this tonight. Doctrine is always there for a reason. There's a big story of God involved, and doctrine is there and fits into that big story. And so the problem with guys like the guys I'm dealing with is they want to isolate a text out of the context of Scripture or the Jewish Scriptures, the Tanakh, and then use that as a battering ram. But you can't do that because it ignores that the Tanakh is one entire thing, that it was all given by God and it all fits together. If Torah is at war with the writings, the Ketuvim, and it's at war with the prophets, then the prophets are at war with God, but God told the prophets what to say, so now God is at war with himself. And so doctrine always serves a purpose, and it's always there for a reason. And so understanding why the doctrine's there helps us to defend that doctrine. So, hopefully this was helpful and hopefully it wasn't too confusing, because I had to admit that there was a normative pattern that was there for tribal stuff, but that pattern was not there to discuss the Davidic lineage. Oh, certainly. That wasn't even the resource I was going to point out. This is the Messianic Texts, Jewish Legends of 3,000 Years by Raphael Patai, Patai. It is gainable at Amazon. I don't know how expensive it is right now. This was a resource I had to go ahead and invest in. This guy is a noted anthropologist, biblical scholar, and author. He taught Hebrew at Hebrew University of Jerusalem and served as the professor of anthropology at Fairlane Dickinson University and Dropsy University, and was a visiting professor at the University of Pennsylvania, Princeton, Columbia, Ohio State, and the director of research of the Herzl Institute, editor of Herzl Press. Thank you, Roxby. Yes, excellent. So, this is where we are for tonight. I'm going to keep researching in my library because it challenges me to go back and become a better apologist, but I hope you see some cogent arguments. I hope these arguments were cogent for you tonight and that you got something really out of this. I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and I'm going to take a little break. You can be praying for my sleeps. Well, there are things going on, but there's a lot going on in my head. Hey, Vocab came on and watched too. Hey, Vocab, I'm not ignoring you. I know you got the side of my head a few times. And so I will sign off until next week. This is Zion's Banner saying shalom, shalom. Be blessed. And I look forward to being with you. I'm thrilled that you were able to make it, Roxy. And Rebecca, you are always such a blessing. So thank you so much. Vocab, we can talk or whatever. I'm just going to sign off now. And shalom, shalom. Have a blessed evening, and I hope you had a blessed Advent.